Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, the man who has become known as the Clown Prince of Podcasters,
Tim Longo. That's wonderful.
Yep. If you got a podcast with a smile.
Wow. Well done. Did you prime that up too? Or
Nope.
was that on the fly? Good work.
On the fly. You got to go with a smile.
The irony of this, which is funny because I'm such a Batman nerd, as apparently the Discord has gotten away from me on. I've actually dressed up more times as the Joker than I have as Batman.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm well aware.
Well, you know of one of them, but you don't know of the other one.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Which was a reenactment of 1989 Batman in a skit. Yes. So, long story. But
I hope there is photographic evidence.
There might even be a third. I definitely was into the Joker for a while, too.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Anyway, we're talking about
Arkham Asylum. Yes. And Joker's Asylum, really, is what it's known as these days.
That's what he calls it, huh?
Yep. Yeah. He's now that he's taken it over, it has become his place.
Not to jump right in, and we didn't talk about this in the pre-show, but just as a quick aside, the whole concept, not concept, but the way that they present his ownership, through the VO and the voiceover and kind of over the loudspeakers and the TVs and stuff. It's one of my favorite things about this game. Like the sense of presence for the boss, and you ultimately know you're probably going to fight him by the end or some version.
Right.
But it's just like he's there. He's ever present, right? It is a very Bioshock in that way.
Well, and if you've got Mark Hamill doing the Joker, you might as well use him to the hilt, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he's so good, and he has such glee in doing it. He really enjoys doing the character. I mean, you can't do a game like this, as many lines as he has, to not
milk it,
to have him and just go whole hog. I mean, he's enjoying.
He's so good. He's really the best Joker.
Yeah,
he's the best Joker. Yeah,
for sure. It's. I mean, it's different from the darker versions of Jokers like the Heath Ledgers or whatever, but I still, I find it really, really compelling. We won't talk about Leto because I'm not going to see this, so just gonna skip over Jared Leto as the Joker.
Well, the other one is the Joaquin Phoenix one, right?
I'm going to skip over that one too. So,
oh yeah, man. I mean, yeah. We have an offline conversation about some stuff in it, and that movie heavily relates to that.
Yeah. We're just going to set that aside.
We'll just move on. Let's just move back.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the place. Let's actually start there. I was going to go to some other things first, but the sense of place, both of him taking it over, but like this island location is really, really compellingly presented. It's hilarious because I know you just got to the Batcave, and it was so funny to me. I was talking about it with one of the people we played D&D with, and I was like, I just got to this part where he just has a Batcave on the island. And I was like, I didn't remember that. I like I said, my memory for game stuff is not great. But I got to that point, and I'm like, of course he does. And then he literally says, it's good to be prepared for these things. That's exactly what Joel said, when I said, he's got a Batcave on the island. He's like, he's the sort of guy who would prepare for that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, Barbara says that to her, right? There's some voice lines where she's like, wait, you have a Batcave on the island? And she's playing the role of the player at that point, the audience, where they're like, wait, what? But it is exactly, I mean, he prepares, that's part of his thing. I mean, again, not to overgush about Batman again, but it's going to happen probably every episode, even though there's some problems, but I think it is such a funny distillation of his whole thing, because I think one of the things I've always liked about the character versus the more metahumans in DC is just he can still be successful by just being a good planner, you know, and good researcher and quote unquote good detective, you know, and because he doesn't have powers. So if he doesn't have powers, then he's got to do something. He's got to use his funds, I guess, because he is rich, and then his brain and such. So, you know, how do you beat Superman if you have to? You know, you got to be ready. And there are various stories where that occurs. So,
yes, yeah.
Yeah, but having a Batcave is definitely funny. But it does apply, to my macro point, which the more I'm playing, the more I realize, especially because we played Bioshock for the podcast and went pretty deep into that. You know, I just have a lot of Bioshock vibes with the game, and I don't remember if I'd heard how much of an influence it was or wasn't on the game, but you know, the sense of place in Bioshock is something we talked a lot about. The sense of place in this is at the same, you know, almost at the same level for me. I think, you know, being a fan, but also it's a localized island, which is good. They do a really good job at the layers of history to the island, you know, because you have this sort of much older stuff with the foundation of Arkham and Arkham himself, and they have those collectibles related to that. And then even when you're going through some of the level design and there's this one small moment when I was playing last night. I guess must have been in the medical wing when I was saving the doctors, but you go behind, you go into the walls and into the infrastructure and the ducts and stuff and the ducting. And you come to this one section where all the metal looks much older than where you just were moments ago. And there's like it's really creepy. There's like an old crushed wheelchair, there for some reason. And there's even rock, like you see bedrock or something, like jutting out of the ceiling. So you just get the sense that they have built this you know, Arkham Asylum through. It's like, you know, it's like a European city or something, right? There's layers built upon layers, and the deeper you go, the more you're like, wow, this has been built up over time.
When you exit the Batcave, you go through. Which I guess you haven't done yet, but you're about to. There's an area of like very old brick and let's say exposed like I-beams or something like that, you know, just like, you know, rusted old, you know, metal, maybe a little bit. And like, you know, just plates of metal on the wall, some wood, right? Yeah. Wood and brick construction with some metal kind of holding things together in places. And yeah, I mean, and it's all kind of like falling apart, right? Because it's, you know, that's where you got to jump around and stuff. You got to jump from here to there, and you know, to traverse and to add challenges to find, you know, Riddler things and all of that. So it's interesting how they do that, and to your point that you made off mic pre-show was, you know, the Metroidvania really comes in all the different layering in the spaces, because there's a lot of spaces you can kind of go to pretty quickly, but then they find ways to make those spaces require different gadgets or to have just layers of activities on them. So it's like, now I can unlock these doors. You know, there's some areas I couldn't get into because I didn't have the cryptographic sequencer thingy, but now I can get into those. So there's a couple of rooms maybe out in the open that I couldn't get into before. I didn't know how to get into, and I got a thing. Or you have the gel, like you can explode your way through a wall. Yeah.
And you saw those walls before you got the gel.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So you have that, like you see these things, you go, I wonder what you can do about that. I mean, the rough edge of that could be like, well, you look at it and you spend a lot of time trying to figure out what to do, right?
It's a double-edged sword for sure. Yeah. And you maybe, I don't remember what the detective vision says before you get the gel, but maybe it says something like you need something more powerful or something. Maybe it gives you a clue to move on, but you're right. It's definitely a tricky thing to get right. But, but I think that, you know, this isn't probably a major takeaway for the end of the series, but a quick takeaway for me that I had forgotten about, because I always, in my mind in the past, I had always, or even out verbally, I had always described this as a Metroidvania-like game, and it is, but I hadn't remembered how it did that. And a minor takeaway for me, which I think is quite clever and obviously intentional, is it's almost like a broader audience Metroidvania, because the Metroidvania stuff comes largely through the collectibles and the optional content stuff. If you go back to a place that you've been, like, I don't think we have to go back to the medical wing probably for any story reason, or if we do, it'll force us to, and it'll be fairly clear what we have to do there.
Right.
But I could go back now that I have the grabby grapple, whatever that thing's called, and the gel, I guess you could say, and I could go search for more stuff. But that's like on my terms versus Metroid. It's like, okay, I need to go through this green door. I don't have the plasma, whatever. And so I have to go, I can't progress until I get it, kind of thing. But relegating not relegating, but putting the Metroidvania aspects into the optional content for a broad audience is nice, because you don't have to go deep into that if you don't want to.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny too, because it exposes that in Metroid, you kind of have to find all the stuff that would be the layered on stuff in this game, right? You know, you have to go find all those secrets, because that's where all the extra missiles are. You know, as you pointed out, I think in the first or second Metroid, like, you can't beat the game unless you have enough missiles.
Yeah, right.
You know, so you have to have found all the secrets, or many secrets.
Good point.
You know, and here they're actually saying, well, you don't have to do any of this. Like, it will give you probably XP as, like, you solve different Riddler puzzles or whatever. Like, there's probably a benefit, but that's kind of relatively small. Like, I haven't been doing most of those, the green, you know, questions that he asks you when you enter an area, because I've forgotten. I thought I was going to have to come back and do them later, because actually I do remember doing that, like, just going back through everywhere on the island towards the end of the game and doing that, as well as finding all the other Arkham things. I just thought I didn't have a gadget that I needed yet. I just forgot how that worked. Playing too many
Batman games.
Right, so it's like I get a little confused. But also, so you're gonna get all the XP for upgrades just by going around fighting people, you know, pretty much, and doing story bits. So you don't actually need to do a lot of side content to max out Batman, as it were, you know. So you also that's a good question, because you might, if you want to max out, I wonder how far you probably don't need to do all of them, but I bet if you just did Critical Path, I wonder if you would max out. Oh, but I mean, my point is, like, question. you can, I think you can leave an area and come back, and some of the guys will respawn.
I think so. Yeah.
So, you know, you could just, like, grind.
Oh, I see. Right.
Just for fighting, right? So, I think you probably can. I mean, if you do, like, the other thing that's really nice is, like, those silly Joker teeth that are all over the place. Those are your, like, if you see those, you know you're going the right way. Because you know they're basically your breadcrumbs, you know, and they give you some tiny, like, 50 XP or whatever towards your progression. So you want to hit them. So you want to be looking out for them, and you essentially want to, quote unquote, consume them, you know, by destroying them. So now there won't be breadcrumbs there later that'll distract you. Like, so it all fits.
They even add them,
well.
Right? Yeah. In the medical wing, when you come out of an area that you just saved the doctor, there's they put those presents
boxes and stuff,
and they've been added.
Had a guy in it.
So it's like, which is great. Which I looked with using my.
I had the detective vision on too.
There's like a guy in there. What's he doing? Oh, that's going to be bad. But it's like, it's, again, like you said, a good affirmation that you're going the right way. I just think from a broad audience perspective, one of the things that Metroidvanias can push people away on are those kind of getting stuck moments, right? Of like, okay, I need a thing. Where do I need to go next to get the thing? And then, you know, I feel like I've run out of options. You know, sometimes those can be wall missions, but here it's more opt-in, which I think is a clever way to give people that Metroidvania feel, but not be so punishing.
Yep, for sure. So alienating, even. Make a Metroid specific gag.
And I mean, that's a macro topic we've talked about before too, especially with Star Wars. It's like, because you have an IP like this, you have to be really careful with what genre you're going to go after and how hard you're going to go after that genre. Right. Because it's Batman, you expect the broader audience to be coming to it, and you don't want it to be like Super Metroid's pretty good. I'm trying to think of well, I mean, the example you just gave of Metroid 1, where it's like you have to go search for all that stuff or you won't succeed. And that's pretty punishing if that were a Batman game where you're having to do that, right? Like you won't reach your audience. And, Warner Brothers wouldn't be probably happy with that.
Right. Yeah. My recollection is Castlevania was pretty tough that way too.
Yeah. That's a good example. I mean, that game is amazing. I still really I have good fond memories of it. But it's not for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. But oh man, what a moment! That thing turns upside down. You're like, what? Amazing. All right. Well, let's get into some of the other stuff. I mean, we should talk about. You mentioned detective mode there, so we should talk about that a little bit. Talking about seeing the guy in the box. I think it's really funny. One of the things I really appreciate about the game is that it does, like, it makes me feel like Batman. This is one where it's a little weird for me because I don't feel like he would need some special vision mode. Like, I feel like he would just look at, like, he would see, like, I guess what it's,
I see what your point. It's like a cheat for him.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think my thinking is he would just look at the world and be like, oh, I see, there's that box on the wall. I can see the power goes into here. It must go under such and such. I can tell from the structure of the floor, whatever, that must be an access panel, blah, 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 blah. Like, that he would just see the world that way. Like, when he's just sort of took a moment to think about it. Like, if you've ever, like, looked at, I don't know, how a piece of furniture was put together or something like that, you can kind of look and be like, oh, I see how they made that join or whatever.
I do that all the time. I look at the furniture and figure out how they do it.
Anyway, look,
furniture expert.
I grew up in New England. There's a lot of furniture making. My grandfather used to make furniture.
All right, fair enough.
And the so it just is weird to me, like, that he's got contacts or something in his cowl. Like, it totally makes sense as a game thing to give me something that really calls those things out in a way that he wouldn't need it to. But that's the one thing that with the detective mode that I go, oh, that's a little, like, really? Batman needs, like, glowy stuff in the world for him to, like, it's also nice to see the skeletons and all that stuff. That's very fun. Cause you can see through things, and of course you can see through walls, and, like, it all makes a lot of sense, but from a game perspective,
it's a gadgety thing. It's technology. It's something that only he probably would have. Yeah. So it makes sense there, but that's a really interesting point I had not thought about, but I think that's really fascinating to me because what you're kind of saying is from a character perspective, it's almost just the presentation of it. And the interesting segue that we have here that I did not anticipate is with the Tomb Raider reboot, we had the same debate because one thing that detective mode specifically, so this was a big influencer on games after detective mode, as people probably know. But for those who aren't thinking of it, like, when it comes to impact and relevance today, kind of for the podcast,
well,
like,
I think it comes from Prime a little bit too. So.
Prime as well, yeah. Both this but for third person games, like, there's a concept of detective mode was like all the rage after these two games. Yeah. Especially this one, because it was so well implemented, even though really it's just an overlay and basically the main thing of just giving you clues about what to do, Yeah. So when we were working on the reboot, like, it was not just popular, but also we wanted her to feel like a smart character as well. In fact, one of our pillars might have been, smart, resourceful Laura. So we debated, like, well, but you don't want just people to have it on all the time, because then the game looks weird the whole time, So there's sort of those balancing things, which I won't get into. But to your point, like, there was a mode like this, but it was meant to be her intuition, right? It was meant to be a representation of her kind of problem solving. And that's just a different presentation of the same thing. Yeah. But she's not wearing goggles, it's not like so if they had presented it for you, if they had presented it differently as like him, matrixing his way through it. Yeah.
I want to see, would have felt more. The Sherlock series from BBC, where he just kind of like sits there and like he makes these connections, and you can see like Benedict Cumberbatch's face kind of looking from here to there, and like and like focusing in on areas of the room, like that's
deduction
kind of,
in practice, real time.
Is more the obviously that came later, but that's more the feel that feels like it would fit him as a character. But
he's a detective.
Like I don't hold it against the game that they make it easy for me, a non-Batman, a non-detective, though somebody who understands how furniture is put together.
It would be great if you could scan furniture and be like, oh, this was a shaker 1922. Oh, interesting. That's a game.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know if
choice to have your religion be founded on not having children. It turns out your sect.
Oh, yikes. I used to live in a town that had a shaker furniture store.
Yeah. I have a couple pieces of shaker stuff myself. So.
Yeah. Well, this is a topic I didn't anticipate us talking about.
All the island furniture.
But I do think it's I think it's a great point that because it is a bit of a cheat for him. But because he is a detective. So interesting.
Yeah,
but it does feel cool. It is cool.
Yeah, it totally works. Yeah, no, it does. It works, and it is so well rendered that it is really cool to use. And
even though it's simple,
I'll do fights with it on just because it's cool to see all the skeletons moving inside. And, it's neat stuff. I mean, they did that in things like later Mortal Kombat games as well. I mean, to show incredible bone damage and things like that, but it was there, to see the internals. So here it's like that. So that's the one thing that I'm like, this doesn't match the fantasy in some ways, but it makes me feel like I'm Batman. It's like I've been given whatever crutch I need to be Batman.
Yeah, maybe that's more of what it ended up being, whether it was intentional or not. It maybe ended up being more of a player thing than a Batman thing. So you kind of have a choice there anyway of like how character focused versus player focused am I going to be? That's always a debate.
Yep. Yeah, it's a hard thing, right? Yeah, and you pointed out
that's where I think Metroid Prime did was the perfect blend of the two.
Yeah, because it was like, oh, her visor has these powers, and it turns out, so now you're looking through her eyes, you also have these powers. So it works really, really well, and it fits, and totally fits with her character. The other thing we wanted to, before we go on to some of the characters who show up and the gadgets as well, the combat mode is the area where I do feel like Batman. What they call free flow combat. I see an antecedent or precedent, I guess, a precedent in Mark of Kree.
Yeah.
Do you remember that game?
Yep, of course.
It was not quite like this because what you did was, I think you assigned 3 of your face buttons to combatants. So it couldn't handle as many combatants. But you basically put square, triangle, and circle. You kind of like could swing this line around the space and like assign those buttons. And then you basically could free flow with those 3 buttons. Like, okay, go to this guy, go to that guy, go to this guy. And it feels like a predecessor to this game. It was very clever. This is even smoother though, because it's literally just point and hit square. Just like, I want to go in this direction at that enemy. And you feel like you're good at it just right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So
it's a very interesting system in that. I don't want to steal his thunder, but I was just actually talking to somebody who worked on the game about this. We were having dinner, in fact, and it's an interesting mixture of, obviously people also equate it to sort of like a rhythm based or timing based kind of mechanic, right? Where you're using a combination of stick targeting and button pressing at the right times, and there's some indications because there's stuff that icons that show up if you're gonna need to press a different button than to defend yourself and stuff like that at different times. But there's no, we were talking about Nintendo a little bit, and there's no lock on, right? The lock on is automatic based on your stick direction, which is sort of already a big shift. And then the input's fairly simple. It's actually a very spammable game when a lot of games like this are usually punishing you for spamming. Right. This is you can still generally, especially if you're not on the hard difficulty, you can probably squeak through just by kind of like, spamming and pressing a lot and being somewhat aware of what's going on. But the thing is, it always looks cool because the animation system and the connections between all of the different blends between each animation, no matter who you're hitting when, is quite revelatory because it's it's very much. I think everyone was studying this after it shipped. Everyone was studying the system. It was like, how did they do it, kind of thing. And like you said, there were definitely predecessors, and people were on their way here.
Was God of War because of the camera, the pull out of the camera.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And it feels like a perfect marriage because Mark of Cree, actually, the camera was pretty close. So it was not like you stayed close in. I wanted to stay on the camera for a moment because the other thing that does, I don't know if you remember this conversation we had with Tim Ramsay back at the end of Republic Commando. He was the graphics programmer. And he was saying, like, for the next generation, which this game would have come out on, you can either do the same number of characters. We were pretty restricted on number of enemies we could have on screen. You could do the same number of characters at higher fidelity, or you could do more characters at lower fidelity, at the same fidelity, basically, right, as the PS2 and original Xbox era. And because they pull the camera out far enough to give you like this tactical view, it allows them to drop down, a lower level of detail, but you can't tell. And then the finishing moves, this is the part where it's really brilliant. They do a quick cut and you see the finishing blow, and it reinforces in your mind that they have that level of detail when you're fighting from further back, even of course, though they don't, right? It's just a beautiful marriage of, of like constraints, because they want to be able to throw more guys at you, right? And so that you're going to fight like a dozen at a time or whatever, and they're not going to look as good as they do when they're close up. When there's a dozen of them, if you could see them all in that fidelity, so they have to pull back because they just wouldn't be able to render it if a bunch of them got in a row or whatever. It'd be too much. Certainly now that we're playing on the PS4s and PCs and whatever that we're playing it on, it can amply handle the resolution of the day. But that is a great technical and design solution, to the constraints that they had on the box.
And art solution, and art too.
Yep. It's everybody working together.
And the slowdown and cut for the end is it serves many purposes because it also tells you you're done with the combat sequence. So it's telegraphing important things to you. It's dramatic. It makes you feel like Batman. And like you said, you get to see the characters up close. And finally,
and they cut so they can position it in as dramatic a way
wherever they want to.
It's like, if you tried to connect like what you were doing up to the moment that they cut, and then what happens after the moment where they cut, because of that cut is there, it's a total visual change, and our memory basically wipes. Like we have that short-term memory thing where it's like, oh yeah, I was jumping with my feet and now I'm punching with my fist. How did that happen? That's just gone.
You don't care.
And you don't care. And I even trying to keep track of like, what am I doing? Doesn't happen. The other thing with the finishing blow sound is those tend to build up. Like, so you have a whole bunch of them in a row at the very end of the fight. Because you get the kapow for every person you take down, for the last time. Like there's lots of like little ones along the way where like this guy's knocked down, but he's going to get back up. But then at the end, it's like bam, bam, bam. It's just like you're just final KO on it's like 5 guys in a row, and it feels great.
Yeah. And the to your point about the camera during a full fight, like it's if they had stuck with fewer characters, say like 1 or 2 or something at a time, all the time, right? Like again, you could have gotten that close in camera, but you wouldn't feel as much like Batman, I think, if that had been the case, because he is somebody who is such supposedly an expert in various fighting styles, that you're going to want to feel like you're outnumbered, but still can succeed. And then the other thing that helps do is to the point of, we were talking about just a second ago on transitions, and, there's a lot of trickery going on when you're stick targeting back and forth and hitting people. And if you watch closely, there's definitely snaps and skips and different, things happening in the animation transitions going back and forth, because you might go from a kick to a jump over somebody. And so it's not perfect, of course, because it's so frenetic, but you really don't care. It's just, it's a ballet of sorts ultimately. And, or an action movie, hand-to-hand action movie. And so, I guess what I'm saying is all the goals reinforced each other really well. And, and it cares about the right things as a combat system.
Yeah. And then another thing I'd throw in about that is, because you're using more than the one or two characters, you get more variation out of what the combats can feel like, because you take 6 grunts, it feels one way. You take 5 grunts and a guy with like the zapper thing, the pain stick,
or a knife,
right? Or a knife, or then like one of the bigger heavies that have to be like triple circle or something, like you have to stun them somehow. That might be mostly in Origins. I'm kind of forgetting now, but like you just throw in 1 or 2 different types of guys into a fight of 6 or 8, and it totally feels different than with just 6 or 8 of the kind of ordinary heavy.
Yeah, it's much more modular dynamic design. Yeah, that gives you more options. Yeah.
Yeah, and it gives you a lot of feel that changes pretty dramatically, and it makes you have to, even though you can be pretty button mashy and it's very forgiving, in a tougher fight, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful about what the real threats are. Like, I can't let that guy with the knife or the jabber or whatever get near me, or that guy charge me or whatever. I've got to always keep them in mind. Like, I knocked him down. Okay, he's going to get up in 3 seconds. Let me make sure I take down 4 of these guys, or whatever. So, I love that dynamic feel. It makes the combat feel like it ebbs and flows, and then builds up to that kind of crescendo at the end.
Yeah, I mean, it's because their goal is numbers. Like, the only other direction they could go is to make each individual combat with the individual characters more complex. Yeah. But instead, because the numbers game is what their goal is, adding in different variety. Still, each individual character interactions are fairly simple. You might have a different like feint or dodge that you have to do depending on who it is. But largely you're doing the same thing. But like you said, the complexity comes in the variety of the group, not each individual combat with an individual. Right. So it's much more scalable and much more like, we need to make this, like you said, we need to make this more complex. We need to make this harder for the end of the game, rather than making it more complex for the player of like, I have to hit all these other buttons now because we need to make it harder. We just add in a new, I think this is late. I don't think they have this in this one, but in City, I think they have like somebody with a shield, right? Yeah, and you just give them a shield, and it's like, now I have to hit him from the hack, and now I have to hit him from the back. Yep. So that one simple thing, he's not more complex. I don't have to hit different buttons. I just have to think differently.
And then, I think, I don't know if they do it in City, but in Origin, because I don't remember, but in Origins, they put it on the screen. Like, you have to do this to get over this guy. And I do that a little bit here too.
I think they do that in City, yeah.
Yeah, they will reinforce, like, watch out for these guys. You haven't seen this guy in a while, but you need to dodge over or dodge past him to hit him from behind. And it's not a lot. They're not saying a ton of stuff, but they are, what little complexity they're adding to the input system, they are reinforcing, and because they'll just throw in 1 or 2 of those guys here and there early on, you start to feel like you've got a player skill, even though honestly you probably don't. It's just, it definitely feels like you do though.
That's the magic. Yeah. You want people to feel that way. And again, I think it goes back to the broad audience goal. Like, it needs to feel like you are a master because you are Batman.
Yeah.
And in fact, every time, even though they need difficulty and they need ways to be able to lose. Every time I lose a fight, I really feel bad. Yeah, because I'm like, ooh,
well, and then they mock you. Joker stands over you.
Yeah, Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about those in pre-show, but those reloading transitions with the taunting. Basically first person with the Joker or whoever took you down. It's really good touch.
Yep. Yeah, it's very funny. It's another case too where they get to reinforce, like they've done all this work to make these really high fidelity models.
Yeah.
Now when they're only rendering one against a black background, go whole hog. Like it can handle one character and all that detail, with 6 different materials on it or whatever. No problem. So go whole hog, do the full model. And I haven't gone and browsed any of the models. I do remember that about this game, that one of the rewards, I haven't looked at them yet, is that you can go and look at the highest fidelity models and kind of rotate around them and look and see all the little rips and tears. And, and it's just it's a lovely way to showcase how much work goes into the art of these games. And can you even imagine how much more it is now that we're however many years on, 14 years on? It's insane. And 2 generations of console hardware. So it's
we usually call that the cinematics LOD. There's like LOD, small, medium, large, and then there's like the ultra, which is above that that you only use in cinematics because there's nothing else happening, and that's what they would use for these interstitial loading things, which I think is just clever to like, oh, I'm reloading the level. Look at this cool thing for a little bit, which is better than just looking at a regular loading screen.
Yeah, one of my engineers pointed out this week that if you make something, we can find a way to put it in the game. If you make something cool, and it's like, well, actually, and he was talking about fluid simulation, and the game that they made, they couldn't do fluids because it was VR, and you have to be at 90 frames per second or whatever, and it's like, if you gave the player freedom to put fluids in 100 different glasses, then they couldn't keep it up at the high fidelity simulation. So they put it on the loading screen. They just won. You could turn in the loading screen, and cool. See all the fluid, and it reinforces to come back. That reinforces it's a smoke and mirrors technique of that's what it looks like all the time. Right? Is like your brain makes that connection. That's how it's always going to look. So. Super cool. What is that noise?
Yeah, sorry. That's somebody backing up outside my window. Yeah, sorry. I didn't close the window. I should have.
No, it's totally fine. It just was funny because I had not heard that one before.
It's probably the Amazon truck or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to talk about the villains? A couple villains?
Yeah, we're starting to get, of course, the intro we talked about last time, which is one for Batman fans and for just even for not Batman fans, introducing these really wonderful exaggerated villains. Of course, you have the Joker, who is ever present. You have that great. You have Harley Quinn in there too. Plenty to say about that character design, unfortunately. But the Killer Croc, right,
and
which is
when we get to her. So.
Yeah, and I haven't been there yet, but the Killer Croc isn't presented in the intro, right? And spoiler, we will meet him for real, and so you've already had a great introduction of like, oh man, look at larger than life. But we had a really cool before we talk about Bane, we had a really cool introduction to the Scarecrow, which is a very unique, not very unique, but it's a pretty legendary villain for the Batman universe because of the whole fear thing. And it's like, what's your greatest fear? And there's a lot of good stories that have delved into what to do with that. Cause, even Batman has fears, but everybody in the universe does. But, I just loved how clever they were with how far they went with that concept, because of course they did the sort of, talk about our podcast influencing each other. There's definitely some internal darkness feel to some of it, right? Where you're like, the world's tilted, or oh my god, those
things have happened. I found Gordon's body, Yeah,
it's not, and then and he's like all these spooky horror movie kind of stuff, which is great fodder for this. It's very tonally on point for
Plugs
what
are
this
running
game is.
everywhere.
Yeah, things
You
like
you open a door. If you go back out of that room, you'll step back into the same room you just left. There's strange things like that as well that are great.
Stuff you can do in video games really easily because you're just portaling and doing all kind of fun smoke and mirrors. Obviously, a lot of hard work from a polish standpoint, but logistically, and then like the tiles being flying off of the wall as you're walking down that hallway there and stuff like that. But then they go even a step further, and you come out into this very surreal space with the Scarecrow, where they pull the camera back. It's almost 2.5D level design going around this central figure, which is this giant, phantasm of the Scarecrow, kind of watching you, trying to find you as you're hiding, and it's also stealthy, and you're using your traversal to kind of avoid him, to get to a bat signal, and it's really cool sequence. But I just remember back in the day, it's like, they could have stopped with just the weird I'm going into a room and another room and tilting the camera and really just doing the stuff that Eternal Darkness did. But they went even further and kind of took you into this other, and you're also in kind of in the middle of space, so the world is not even real. That's
the part I don't love, that abstraction. I think also it pulls the camera way back out from Batman, and Scarecrow's huge and everything. So like I get what they're doing. It doesn't super work for me. It's mostly because the controls get a little wonky as a result. It's like
it's not perfect,
And I think that so like the gameplay gets in the way for me a little bit. It's like I'll fall and be like, he would not fall there, And you reload. You get the Scarecrow looming over you. It's cool to see Scarecrow and all his detail and all that. But yeah, those. So it's like on the one hand, I appreciate that they went to this whole different place, and to the other it's like just a little bit, like I just need a little help. I need you to be more generous with the jumps or something. Like I need you to linearly interpolate him to where I want to go. Like I jumped off this ledge towards that ledge, like really that's what I want to do, right? So there's a little bit of that I could use a little help with, just to because I feel less Batman-y in those moments.
You're talking about Dead Space turrets, basically.
Yes,
it's a palate cleansing level that is supposed to be cool and interesting. Don't make it hard. Just let me play it and experience it. It's actually pretty short as well.
It is pretty short, and it is fairly generous with the checkpoints. Like you don't have to, if you get more than halfway through, you don't have to go back to the beginning. But it's always, for me, I just line up and jump wrong, because of the cameras.
Yeah, the cameras changed. Yeah. The thing, no, that's fair. That's a fair point, because it is quite a shift, and it's not necessarily they haven't tuned the game around this sort of camera and stuff, so it's not its strength. But the thing that I appreciated from a context perspective, though, is one of the things that they often, that is, anytime Scarecrow is in the comic, they're always trying to think of clever ways to make it in a comic book form feel just over the top and weird, because his whole thing is the fear gas and all that kind of stuff. It's like, they've just tried everything. They've done so many different versions of it, but this was just for me. It's like, he's going to of course he's going to make himself larger than life. He's going to make you feel small as Batman because he wants to reverse that that dynamic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and he's going to feel like this giant, and then sort of to have the bat signal be the thing that kicks him out of it. I don't know, just again, nerd stuff, but it's just really sort of clever.
Scarecrow's character design too. I mean, I love those fingers with the the syringes in them. Like, it's super creepy.
Very Freddy Krueger. Yeah,
I love that. Generally, I think he's a well designed character, even in the comics, with this his burlap and like the Scarecrow motif. Him being super thin and everything. There's a sequence like that in the Origins where it's the Mad Hatter. I don't know if the Scarecrow.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the Scarecrow appears in that one. At least I haven't run into him. I'm getting pretty close to the end. It is and it's the same stuff. It's the same like abstract space, and it was the same problems. And I was like, it's like it's so close. Like I just want it to be easier. I want to have the fear. I want the fear actually to come more from some of the AV, that, and not the play. Like I don't want the play to be difficult, but I do want it to be even spookier from an audio standpoint. Like I want like Alien Isolation level fear vibes, but I don't want it to be that tough. I don't know. I might be asking the impossible.
No, I get it. I think, well, at least in the first Scarecrow sequence in this game, you already are trying to time it based on the light.
Yeah.
So you already have one
not so bad. I've done the
thing you're doing.
As well. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the second one.
So there's no.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying there's no reason to add more complexity to the jumps. You could just keep it timing based and be fine. Yeah. They're just trying to prove a point. They're not necessarily trying to make you die all the time. But
point of order.
But it is it's just a clever, and because this is something you return to time and time again throughout the game, it's this not just palate cleanser, but it personifies this villain, right? They could have just had a boss fight, right? Yes. But they actually took level design resources and turn these things into something much more of a reality, despite how they're tuned. Right. And then versus Bane,
hold on. Point of order before we go on from the statement you made earlier. Everyone in the universe has fear. Point of order, not Daredevil, who is, of course, the man without fear.
I mean, okay, all right. I have some things to say about that though, because he does. I know that's his tagline. I'm also a big Daredevil fan.
I know he's the Marvel Batman.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. He is, and
he sort of is, right? He's partially he's just blind instead. That's whatever.
Yeah. They're equated together. Yeah.
They have a lot. Yeah, they have a lot of things. Couldn't let that one go. I'm not surprised you're a Daredevil fan. I don't really know much about Daredevil. I just know his tagline. So
he's actually
he's in one of his show or whatever.
He's one of my favorite Marvel characters, actually. Yeah. For similar reasons. He's a very symbolic character in a lot of ways, because he's blind, Justice is blind, he's a lawyer. Like there's a lot of different things going on.
Yeah.
But anyway,
he also has no powers, right?
Yeah, he has no powers, right? I mean, other than his sonic, it's not a power per se, but he has developed.
He has developed an ability,
expertise. Yeah.
So has Batman. So.
Yeah. But I just think it's a good contrast to talk about, because obviously, for better or for worse, villains are a big thing in the Batman universe, like the Bat universe. It's like it is very centered around him and all the villains and the rogues gallery. And Scarecrow's big. We've seen Joker. We've seen Killer Croc. We've seen Harley. And Bane, fairly infamous, as in the comics at least. Not a lot of people know Bane, although he was in the third Nolan movie and blah, blah, blah. But he is actually a later addition to the canon, if people didn't know that. But anyway, he is supposedly one of the few people who've beaten Batman. So anyway, this boss fight, though fun, and like you said earlier, does teach you some certain mechanics on how to deal with brutish characters. Pretty traditional, pretty simple, and not that interesting, but it does give you a great villain introduction and then feeling his power. Yeah.
Story development as well.
Yeah, storytelling too, because of the whole
sense of like this Dr. Young's been up to no good, and like he's been tortured. Like he's a villain, yes, but he's also like, look at him, he's pathetic, when you first see him. And he's desperate.
Horrific.
Yeah, it is. And that's, I think that's a really strong point in the story's favor of like, this is a really dehumanizing place. And it's
Arkham is a bad place. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you run into the lunatics later, which is not a portrayal I'm particularly fond of. I get it. They wanted another enemy to throw in there, another little systemic change, but it's like,
oversimplified. Yeah.
Yeah. A little paper thin there, but, they are, fodder. So I get it, but But yeah, I mean, I think just it's like nobody's good here. Like the warden's not great. The only person who's any good who's in there with you is Jim Gordon and a handful of people who you rescue, who have like one line, and then they say, "Thanks for saving me," and he says, "Well, lock yourself up here, and I'll be back," or whatever. And so it's good to find a way through the villains to tell a deeper story, and I just appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, and Bane is a tragic character, kind of because of this experimentation and such.
Right.
He kind of didn't ask for it, kind of stuff. But yeah, you're right. It does set up the kernel of the crux of what maybe Joker is up to with all of this too, which is good.
Yeah, and immediately after that, you'll start to hear more about Barbara's oracles looking up, trying to track down funds in the doctor's accounts now that you have her name, and like he calls her Bruja, which is witch. She's been doing something to him, and you're going to meet her soon as well. You haven't yet, but you're about to, I think, in the next section.
Isn't she the one you save? One of the doctors? You just don't know that she's doing this yet.
Right.
I think she's one of the 3 doctors. If you're talking about Dr. Young.
Yeah, but she also doesn't last too long.
Okay. Yeah, maybe so. I'm not there yet. But in fact, when you go and save her, you overhear her talking to her captors saying, basically that she's been hired or is an ally to Joker, or is, because she wanted, anyway. Yeah, so I mean, it's the breadcrumbs, good breadcrumbs.
Yeah, but everybody's bad.
Everybody's bad, yeah. I mean, that's kind of, that's one of the problems. Like, everyone's bad, but the Bat family, and that's kind of where it ends.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the Star Wars problem, right? It's like there's 2 families in the universe that are fighting across, 6 movies or whatever, or 9 movies.
And there's only one city, it's Gotham. It's a very small universe, but somehow, that's such a weird, fascinating thing about the Bat universe. It's such a multi-billion-dollar whatever over time.
Yeah,
but it's so small.
To Hong Kong and stuff like that.
No, he goes around. Yeah, no, he goes to London. I mean, he travels. But as far as fictional, there's Metropolis and all the other fictional ones are associated with other heroes. But it's not like, well, there might be. I think I'm maybe thinking of some local nonsense, but around Gotham. But yeah, you got Gotham, you got Arkham. You got Blackgate. It's not, but you don't need it because it's a human, he's a human character, right? And the villains are often fairly human. And so it is such a big contrast. That's why it's always weird to me that he was in the Justice League at all, right? I think it's just because he was popular, but it's doesn't really fit. He doesn't belong there.
Yeah, he should really start his own called the Vengeance League.
Nice, yeah.
I'm the Knight.
Payback. That's a boys reference, but
yeah.
Anyway,
I like that show.
The Boys?
Yeah, pretty violent.
Oh, yeah. No, talk about superheroes. I'm just about finished with season 3, but it is rough. Yeah. Hard to recommend, but I appreciate it.
Yeah. I read the comics as well. I got them out of the library. And I was like, yeah. I see. It was, different. It was sort of different in the way Watchmen was different,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I read them back in the day too. Yeah. Superhero commentary, which we need more of.
Sure. I don't know how much more we need, but let's. I'm going to actually say let's table. We've got a couple other things. The teaching gadgets. We're going to talk about.
Yeah, we can go to email.
We'll have more gadgets, and
we've got plenty to talk about.
I think we should go to email and answer some questions and things like that. So let's do that. We were sent a couple emails this week to dev@gmail.com. Sir, go ahead and take the first one, as is customary.
Yes, from Baron. And then the subject is, and then there was Free Flow from Baron Music. Baron Music. I guess I didn't realize that they... Okay, I would say that one of the biggest factors for the lack of good licensed superhero games up until this game, as Brenton pointed out, was the discrepancy of playing a hero and feeling like a hero. Rocksteady inventing modern free-flow combat hit the nail on the head while also matching shape and color for Batman Arkham Asylum. In this game, it is clear that Batman is one that actually does all the combat. I can trust him. Like Tim said, he is Batman. He is the one that knows every type of martial art, so not much is required for the player to start pummeling bad guys one after another with the press of a button. But life is never that easy, and it wouldn't be rewarding to turn the game into a button masher. Don't be on your toes, or you can easily get killed. And here is where the feeling of becoming the Bat is so wonderfully achieved, giving the player the responsibility of keeping the Dark Knight alive by jumping, dodging, and countering, and then continue to whack. The whacking on the next underpaid henchman was never seen before. All of that combined with the stealth, the gadgets, the forensics, the detective work, revolutionized the superhero games forever. I'm excited to hear your thoughts as veteran game developers on the combat system. I know games like Assassin's Creed did a form of free flow combat before, but is more free than flow, as Altair,
yeah.
Altair, I never knew how to say that, and Ezio can stand still for 10 seconds during a fight, and no combo counter would suffer. What did you think the first time you experienced free flow, and was it evidently instantly how impactful? Evident.
Sorry,
instantly.
I did not edit that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. How impactful this would be for games to come. Sorry for the long post, Baron. Thank you, Baron.
Well, not too long. That's right out at the upper reaches.
That's perfect.
Yeah, no problems.
Luckily, we just talked a lot about free flow. Yeah,
it's almost like somebody reads these emails.
Oh,
right.
Nice. There's a producer behind us somewhere.
There is. There's somebody pulling the strings. Is there a puppet guy in the Batman universe? There is, right?
Yeah, the ventriloquist.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yep.
I think I saw his dummy in the warden's office.
You probably did.
Under glass. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. There's one of those characters. Yeah, so, I remember at the time thinking, whoa, this is really good. this combat,
Yeah.
right? The bar has been raised on this sort of combat. I remember at the time, because it was because of the simplicity and the way it makes you feel. We're going to have a counterpoint on this in a moment, but the way it makes you feel like the character you're playing, I definitely at the time was like, whoa. It's the thing I remember most about the game. This probably in detective mode, and I like the Joker as well. So though I've never dressed up as the Joker, so it's 3-0. So it is for sure. In the moment, I was like, "Whoa, I'm glad I don't make these kind of types of games, because this is where the bar is now." So, I remember thinking that when Half-Life came out, it's like, "Oh, phew! I'm working on a flight action game. Don't have to worry about this." So it's always nice.
And then you worked on a first-person shooter.
Yeah, well,
But Half-Life helped us and influenced us for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It was pretty instantaneous. We had the weird perspective in that we're playing this already as game developers. So for better or for worse, when a game comes out like this and it does have something this impactful, we just all immediately start talking about it and analyzing it and overthinking it and almost ruining it to some degree. Yeah. But to your point, Baron, there were games like Assassin's Creed and others that were Mark of Kree, like you mentioned, and God of War, that were getting closer and closer, I think, to this, but with different goals for sure, right? And I think for me, because the stars aligned in this case, because the character, like you said in the mail, the character and those goals, and I still think the audience was important, right? What they were trying to do. And if, fingers crossed, we have a good chance of getting at least one person on to talk about as a guest. Hopefully they can talk more about it. But I understand, and I think they've been fairly public about this, that the journey to this combat was not easy, of course, right? They tried different things out that were quite different from where they ended up. So I think that's always fascinating too, because that process of iteration is often very tricky and very, mired in all sorts of different things that can go wrong and right. But he's right. Baron, you're right. I mean, it's really kind of never been the same since for these kinds of games.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned about, we were talking about shooters there. That's another place where you see, like, oh, this game, like the gun, Halo is a good one that we played where you're like, oh, wow. On a console, we talked a lot about the controls for first-person shooter in that game and just how, silky they were. And, that made a big difference. So there are often these sort of touch points where like that game influenced a decade of games, and I think that this is one.
Well, and the problem solving,
some of those games were also, sequels. So,
yeah, the problem solving is usually what that's where the gold comes in, because in like you mentioned, Halo, which is a good example in another genre, which we played GoldenEye as well, and it did not solve this problem, but the twin stick shooting and how do you make that work on a controller, that was not a solved problem up until that point for the most part. And they made things move forward. And this, similar to this, like for better for worse, especially third person, character action games like this. This solved problems that people hadn't quite solved yet without maybe even completely knowing it at the time. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
And I think it's it's a sum of many parts, and we've identified some of the origins of some of those other parts, but still got to put them together. Right. And, it's often like you'll try one part of it and it won't work because you haven't done the other parts. Like I can imagine who knows? I don't know how they got to where they got. So, just speculating. But you take any one part of it out. It's like, oh, we don't pull the camera way back like they did in God of War. And we can only do 2 or 3 guys. The rendering guys come and say, yeah, sorry, we can't have that fidelity. We could drop it, but it's noticeable, blah, blah, blah. Or you can't do the tactical stuff. So you pull the camera back. It's like, oh, okay, that solves a lot of problems. But now it feels like the character has to cover too much space, so your animation system has to step up and sell that is possible, right? To get from this guy who's 20 feet away from this other guy, with this like back spring jump and kick to his face, like, so you have to like bring that forward, and it's just like and right. It's takes a number of those pieces, and then just the stick targeting. So to put so many pieces together so beautifully, is definitely very impactful. And you can sort of see, there's multiple paths to any summit, but as Tim would probably be better suited to tell you, but that's that's one of those things that we look at and say, man, how did they get here? Where did they start? How and what problems did they solve on the way to the final solution? All right, I'll do one here. The subject is I Am Not Batman, from Jarkko Sivula. Arkham Asylum is one of the best games I've finished despite the boss fights. However, one interesting thing I noticed while playing was that I never identified with Batman. I've been a fan of the comics and Tim Burton movies from childhood, but playing the game, I felt like I was kind of an observer or maybe helper. One thing is just that the character is so established and I'm just not that character. But one other thing was the disconnect in the combat. With very simple button presses, the hero did all kinds of cinematic moves. Yeah, it's interesting because that's the other side of it. Is like
it's a contrast.
Yeah, it's definitely it's like me with the detective vision. So I'm fine with the combat, but this other thing trips me up a little bit. Do you ever feel while playing story-driven or character-based games that is very good entertainment, even if you don't feel like you're in the game? Also, he says, thank you for your awesome Eye of the Beholder series and boosting the visibility of my first modest game release. And congrats on that again, Jarkko. So,
Yay.
games that are very good entertainment, even if you don't feel like you're in the game. Characters in particular, I guess. That's a tough one for me to answer.
Because you don't care. You just play the game.
Often I don't. Lots of characters, like I don't connect with the characters, but I'm just doing the things. Whatever the things are. So it's hard for me to say.
It's interesting. I mean, I know what he means, what they mean, but I'm trying to think. Like, I don't know if I would put Witcher in that camp or not, because it's similar.
He does have way more than you.
What's that?
He does have way more hair than you.
Oh yeah, sure, and muscles, yeah, for sure. But Witcher's just fantasy Batman, to be honest. But
send your too.
I mean, come on, he's fantasy Batman with a little bit of Jedi in there, and then he talks like Snake. So it's like, yeah, you can see the Venn diagram, everybody. No, but the reason I'm hesitating is that the interesting thing about the question is I actually, for playing games for pleasure, I'm not drawn to games that are just purely there for entertainment, like just kind of the popcorn of it. Like, I don't know, I'll say Call of Duty, or I don't know, something that's just mechanically there's there, but it's not that much. It's really just, or at least for the campaign, it's very just watch the movie in a way. I know that's very reductive, and you know what I mean. It's not true, very fair, but so I don't. I'm not trying. I just don't think I'm drawn to them. And in fact, if I get an inkling that it is going to be pretty, be honest.
I wonder about Control for you.
Yeah. Well, the Control.
I remember discussing. Well, we love the fiction.
That
was one where I really got
into
it. But the actual play, you were like, I don't feel connected to to the combat systems, which felt stylish and not substantive.
I just liked being in that world and playing. You're right. No, I think that is a recent example, because I did finish that game. I didn't play the DLC, but I did finish it, and I really only finished it because I wanted to kind of see what happens.
Yeah.
But the playing of it, I thought was not.
Yeah, there was a point for me where towards the end, there was a big fight in a big room where I was like, I'm turning down the difficulty now. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
I don't like the combat's not so good that I'm enjoying overcoming this struggle. Like, and I probably tried it 5 or 6 times, and it was just like, yeah, you know what? I don't need this. It's fine. I'll go. And I think that's a game actually where you're not punished. I think I got 100% on the the trophies and everything. So it's like they didn't even care. Like, they were like, yeah, okay, no problem. Like, go ahead.
Turning down difficulty, you mean?
Yeah, turning down difficulty.
Yeah.
There are a lot of games where they'll be like,
you have to finish on hard.
Yeah, you can't do this, whatever. That was actually I had a frustrating fight in Origins, where I was really it was a boss fight. It was against what's his name?
Deathstroke.
Yeah,
I knew. I was going to ask you off air actually how that fight was, because I remember that being really rough.
It was very difficult, and there was no doing anything else. And actually, like, this is a Montreal thing, because I remember that being true of Human Revolution as well, whatever the first Deus Ex game was, the prequels that they did.
The boss fights,
where the bosses were just like, and it just like, wasn't the same company, obviously, but I remember I was in there and I was like, well, I'll just go and level and stuff. And it's like, no, this is it. This is your save. You're in this room.
I almost put Origins down there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took many, that is a room that took me probably an hour and a half to play. It took me 5 minutes to beat it when I finally beat it, but it took me an hour and 25 minutes to get to that point. And I was not happy. And I was like, oh, well, I'll just turn down the difficulty. And I'm like, oh, I'm playing on the lowest difficulty. There's no easy mode. There's like normal and then hard. So I was like, oh, God. And I was like, I hope the rest of the game isn't like this. And it hasn't been. So that was one misstep in that game. But those are the things that, take me out of it. Because it's like, well, I'm Batman. He's going to beat everybody. he's not going to take him 30 tries. I was in that moment. I was imagining the multiverse of Batsmen, where there's all these times that I failed, where that Bruce Wayne was revealed as Batman by the villains and died. And there's one in which I finished the game. So there's one, and how many Batsmen are split off from that fork, from that one through line.
It's called Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh, okay.
It's a whole,
It's a whole thing. I believe you.
Yeah. Well, it's just multiverse
stuff. Sure.
I feel like DC's been doing multiverses way harder for longer than people realize because MCU now has embraced it, But
yeah,
I think DC doesn't get enough credit.
Doing it too. Yeah. No, that's true. They used to do that as a kind of a. Well, I think it was for them. It was like, how do we sell more comic books with the same characters, but not tell the same exact stories, but so we can vary them in some way? I think that was
I think it goes back to what we were saying on the first episode too of the series of just like DC is a lot more mythological,
right?
And like things are just a lot more. I mean,
cosmic.
Cosmic. Even though Marvel's finally embraced cosmic as well, but they weren't always as much that, I don't believe.
Yeah. I think Kirby kind of was going in that direction.
He did, they're new gods and things like that. Yeah, there was some stuff, but it wasn't their bread and butter, I feel like. But
yeah, no.
So once you have Superman,
I even know about DC going back a long way with that stuff, so it has bled over to me. All right, well, thank you for those emails to devgameclub@gmail.com. And we have a couple singing reviews in the can that I've got to.
Oh, they're in the can?
Well, they're in the
that means
box. They're not done. I gotta do it.
Okay.
That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that. I just meant they're
okay. No, I'm just clarifying because I just
we have them. They're in our
they're in the queue?
In the future. Yes, in the queue. That's a much better word. Thank you.
Okay.
You're gonna find us on the web at devgameclub.com. And I still watch our Twitter at devgameclub, though I more and more frequently forget to post.
Please, X.
Yeah, no. If it ever gets to a point where it's like, well, you have to call it that now, it's just that's when the count dies. It has been like 228 days since it last happened, but you might be able someday find my co-host at twitch.tv/
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
We also have a Discord. There will be a link in the show notes. We are more than a Pokemon Gen 1 Dex in size now. So yeah,
that's going to be our metric.
Yep.
How many Pokédex entries do we have?
Exactly. But yeah, we're like the 160 or so mark. That's pretty cool.
Was this whole Pokemon thing Calamity's fault? Is he the one that...
I feel like Calamity, Highmark, and Artimage all work together on that. So,
okay.
And actually, there's a bot. Like, you can ask which Pokemon that Mark actually told me. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers. Our logo, our Discord, and so much more, including JuneBot and the thing that keeps track of when Tim last streamed, all by Mark Garcia, who also runs a merch store. And when does this guy find the time? Have fun playing your foes like violins and then cutting their strings this week. And good night.
Good night.